When when we rest in the heart, it's so much easier to become appreciative of some things that maybe we forget sometimes. It seems that when we're in our head, just because something is provided moment after moment, it's assumed that that is that's just taken for granted, and we can miss how lucky we are, and how much we actually have each moment if we take things for granted. And in the heart, it's easier to be able to take a deep breath and realize that every time we take a breath, we're given this gift of life that comes with being able to take in fresh air. And that actually, if we had to pay for air, we would give $1 million for our next breath, or actually 3 minutes of air. And we get it for free, moment after moment. And if we take these very important things for granted, what we're saying is actually, we have all this important stuff, but let's pretend it doesn't exist, and then now I only have to look at what I don't have. It's a funny perspective if we just turn it round and start to realize that we have food provided for us, and air provided for us, water, friendship, and actually see how important that is in terms of our living, the sense of being, clothing. Then actually in an instant, if there happens to be some uncomfortableness, that can stop just from this turning inwards and seeing everything we have. Because often that uncomfortableness is because we think something has been taken away or not delivered. And you can't have the two together. You can't have gratitude and uncomfortableness. So it's a very nice way of, if we remember to be grateful, can't have gratitude and uncomfortableness. So good solution to uncomfortableness. And it's also, I think, the breath in particular, it's not something theoretical. It's like even food, to be grateful for food when you don't have food in front of you, if you don't happen to be eating at that moment, or you're not hungry because you've eaten already. In a way that still is maybe a bit theoretical. And the breath, every moment we need to take a breath. So this, in spirituality, the breath has always been something that we're told to focus on, and this is a way that actually when we're focusing on it, we can add an extra angle to the importance of breath. We go, so any time when we take a breath in, we can remember that God in this moment has given us fresh air for free, and so we can be grateful, not in theory, but actually in practice. And then when we have this sense of personal doership, which creates it creates a separation attitudinally. If we believe we're the doers, then by default we've disconnected from the source of life and the source of everything that's happening, because we've claimed ownership over what's happening through us. And then society supports this so much with the use of our jobs, so we feel like we have made this effort to produce whatever we produce at work, and so then the product is exchanged for money, and so it becomes my money, and in that sense then I have to protect my money, I have to be careful how I use it, and I use it in exchange for other goods I need, and so we end up entering into transactions all the time, where we're not really connected to anything. We are separate and we're out exchanging instead of just receiving and giving. It doesn't mean we have to stop using money, but it's like, actually this money is a gift from God. First He gave me the motivation to work, the capacity to work, delivered a job to me, and as a result this money has come. So really it's not my money, it's not my work, not my effort. Everything is delivered to us from God. There are people who don't have the fortune of having a job. It hasn't been delivered to them. They might not have the capacity to be motivated, might feel depressed, and that's not their doing either. That's something as part of their destiny. And so when we have these things, to be grateful for having them instead of to be proud of them brings a gentleness, and we can stop interrelating with other humans as though they are a means to an end. And so if we stop looking at money as my money, we can still pay for things, but really out of gratitude. It's like, thank you for giving me my food, and here's a present in return. And then the small things, like if the taxi driver charges you 5 rupees more, it's like, internally it's my gift to you. You know, I have this, I want to make you happy because I've been given so much, and so here, have the 5 rupees. You don't say anything. It's just no need to argue, no need to compete. And then I think from this place, at first it doesn't make sense, because let's say we have a limited budget, so I can't give away extra. And I think from looking at it too closely, we miss out on what we might actually get in return from being in the space of wanting to help and wanting to give, not wanting to protect so much. And it's not about giving. See, if we have a really tight budget, maybe even 1 rupee, put some 1 or 2 rupees in your pocket, and just the act of giving 1 rupee out can strengthen that muscle of not feeling as though it's my money. It's just for the fun of making someone happy. A beggar, for 2 rupees for a beggar, if they don't have much at all. Even if they maybe touch your leg and it makes you feel uncomfortable or something, actually that's real giving, is when someone doesn't deliver, doesn't give you a nice smile, for example, or looks at you and you feel threatened. To be able to give there, that's really breaking a habit. A habit where we tend to, even when we're giving, it's only if I feel good in the situation, to actually feel challenged and then still give, then we're really challenging ourselves. And all this from recognizing that we've been given so much for free to start with, that if we said to God, wow, you give me so much for free, how can I ever repay you? And He might say, actually, you don't have to repay me, but what's good for you and everyone else is if the possibility arises where you don't compete with others, even intellectually. If someone says something to you, you don't have to win the argument, you don't have to make them wrong, you don't have to make yourself right, because that's competing in a sense as well. And He says, just in any situation when you recognize that you're competing, if it's easy to just say, actually, I get so much, and so I don't need to compete. I'm grateful for what I receive, and therefore the other, God says, don't make the other your competitor, don't make the other one your enemy or rival. That's the only repayment that I require. And if you find that it's not easy at some point in time and automatically they're your competitor, then that's okay. Next time is the next opportunity to try and just love and give instead of take and defend. And it's attitudinal. It's not, money was just an example. It's not about giving money. It's much better internally for us to try and recognize when we defend attitudinally and see that that's not gratitude. That's feeling like we're missing something. Someone can take something away from us. Did anyone have any questions from previous days, or any comments, or anything that you were thinking about, or anything?
From what you shared, it definitely highlighted the prejudice that the me has, camouflaged as wanting to do right. But like I know what that is, and just really kind of was nice because it really highlighted the, God doesn't have prejudice on not just which human being gets air, but which animal gets air. Like life is provided for without prejudice.
It's unconditional.
And how easy it is, definitely. Like I woke up, just kind of present to everything is a miracle. Even like all of it is just, like how to not move away from that, So, like the breath is such a simple thing to overlook. And exactly what you said, just. It's funny because so many of these like peak moments, they happened around breath. Like there's a moment of, whoa, like look at what I'm being given in just this breath, and to not get caught up in a me, like I'm special, like what I got, but thanking, God, the absolute, for what I'm being given, and it just really kind of hits at the whole like wanting to seek humility. What I mean by humility is the I don't know. That someone knows. Leave it up to that.
Yeah. That's it. Sometimes being independent has turned into something that's very important to us. And it's true when we find ourselves dependent on the flow of life, we really are restricted, because every time the flow of life doesn't turn out the way we expect it to, then because we're dependent on it being a certain way, we really feel threatened. And so to become liberated from being dependent on the flow of life is fantastic, and I think that is what why people seek to become independent. But then at some point, even that independence that we feel we have because we are able to buy our own things and find that we can survive without the company of others, let's say, or without needing a relationship, even that independence then needs to be seen as not the ultimate state. The ultimate state is we're totally dependent, moment to moment, on Source. That without a connection to Source, the sense of I that resides inside of us, the feeling of aliveness, the consciousness that functions through us, wouldn't be there. And so to recognize that actually in any moment we're totally dependent and never will be independent, totally dependent on Source, which that's not something that we then have to be afraid of. It's a gift, because we can see actually this dependency on Source means that I am connected to Source, or Source is what's functioning through me. And so to get lost in this idea of how important independence is can keep us separated from what is most special and valuable inside of us, is to recognize that actually what I am is not a separate three-dimensional being that is vulnerable to old age, and I am actually an expression of Source, and my life is only here because Source is functioning through me. And then that's the humility that happens where we're not trying to be humble or anything. It's just a natural recognition that for as long as my life is, I can appreciate life. And at the point when life will end, it will end without anyone being able to do anything about it. And that, I think, is what allows gratitude to arise. And more importantly, it is the end of fear, because it's the end of believing myself to be the separate, vulnerable entity, and recognizing that the essence that functions through here is impersonal, formless, timeless, was never born, will never die. And that's our true peace of mind, our true strength is coming to that connection to Source, which means we actually have to recognize our total dependency. And in the talks, it's what we're looking for, if we find ourselves seeking, is the absence of suffering as it arises moment to moment in its different forms: guilt, blame, pride, anxiety, expectations. And then the sub-forms of guilt can be shame, insecurity, lack of self-worth. What we're actually looking for is simply the absence of those feelings, which we can call peace of mind. And I lost my train of thought. What was I going to say? Oh yeah. So that's the description of what we're looking for, is peace of mind, the absence of suffering. And how that comes about or when it's there, what we recognize is that peace of mind is what is naturally there when our connection to Source remains unbroken, or when our recognition of our connection to Source remains unbroken. And as soon as the recognition of our connection to Source is covered up, then by default what we will find is that we feel separated, we feel alone, we feel vulnerable, we take life personally, the other is a competitor or an enemy. And if the flow of life delivers outcomes that are not in line with our expectations, then we start to suffer, and these feelings of guilt and blame and pride arise. So really, when we find that we have what we want, which is peace of mind, simply the absence of suffering, we realize that it's there because there is the continuous, unbroken recognition of our connection to Source.
It's like seeing from what you're sharing, it's like highlighting all these moments that Source has been like through many people saying, and just seeing like the simplicity of it, but at the same time just seeing that eye that thinks, no, I've got to do this, I've got to, like, not trusting the Source is, and it's always demonstrated, like, the best results happen when I'm in that space, but then there's like, oh, I need to do something to make sure that stays, then the eye comes back in, oh no, I better really figure this out, you know, and then the problem starts. And it's,
I think maybe it's
so counterintuitive to the identity. The opposite. I think the thing that's kept me from really just saying enough, like I'm going in that direction, is like this idea of like, oh, that's just hokey, you know, like that's, you know, just some really superficial judgment, thinking it's weak or whatnot, but it's just clearly it's just ignorant. Ignorance of seeing just the facts. You know?
Yeah, we're just an instrument through which life is functioning. And if the beauty is in recognizing that, which we think is weak, we give up something worthless, our sense of doership, to receive something priceless, which is the recognition of what our real essence is. It's only this idea that, you know, we need to be in control and that being in control is important. Wow, what a relief. I'm not in control. I don't need to try and make things happen. I don't need to regret the outcomes in the past that were not as favorable as I would have liked. I don't need to worry about expectations in the future because it will all unfold as it's meant to unfold.
You know, it highlights this. Years back, there was like a moment where I was like, there was like all this, like resentment towards my dad, not like, you know, the whole father, you know, like provider, protector, all that. And there was a period a long time back where it was really clear, like, it was just the nature of having it in the wrong father, like the whole mother-father thing, just like all these ideas that are thrust upon them, where they feel like it's their sole responsibility versus that awareness of like his children come through them, you know, and they're, you know, just like, you know, the animals, the trees, like it's all, it has its own provider, really. You know, there's an assistance and supporting, but it's really only recognizing that they're really supporting. And I woke up wanting to call my dad today and just, because I just see like the whole, like the delusional burden that father or mother can carry. Like it's really up to them with what happens with your life, you know, and it's like, you know, I'm alive. They succeeded. You know what I mean? Like I didn't die in childhood. That's really, I think, the only thing that a parent really can. They should be, I don't know, like really responsible. It's just like, hold on, let me protect them until they come into the support that's there.
Actually, in doing that, in recognizing that, it's not only the burden that they have, feeling that they need to be, the other half of that is the expectation that we have of them to do what is important for us. You know, so there would be, in expressing that to them, you're also expressing something to yourself. Where, yeah.
It's just so weird, like to shift the focus from all those nonsensical ideas and expectations of who they should have been and who I should have been, which is all just nonsense, and versus just focus on the fact, like, you know, they're a miracle, I'm a miracle, you're a miracle, and hey, this miracle's still here, yay, this miracle's still here, you know, and being that versus that other stuff where it's just suffering. it gave me a place to like, put, like, focus my attention on. It seems like it's easy to get caught in those, stay in those patterns, versus just stay with the actual facts, get present to the facts. Someone pointed it out, but now it's just really seen as just the whole, like staying as a blamer, blaming someone for anything. It's just like it totally cuts you off. It leaves that attention stuck in this, like knowing better, right, whole identity.
If you blame the other, you're telling them, you're saying to yourself, they are separate, that they should have done something differently, that they could have done something differently, which is then saying, well, if they're separate, I'm separate. And as soon as that's the case, we're suddenly into this idea that there are 6 billion, 7 billion different separate entities all doing what they choose to do based on their total volition, and anyone who hurts me is my enemy. Whereas if we recognize that actually life is flowing through all of us in order for the story, a very specific story with a great amount of detail, magnificence, instead of recognizing that a story has been designed to unfold a certain way. And from that perspective, we're friends. Even if I do something or an action happens through me that hurts you, not my intention, but rather my destiny and your destiny to experience that situation. And then from that point of view, someone hurts me, it's no longer someone hurting me, but rather an action that was destined to happen in order for my destiny of feeling hurt to happen. And from that point of view, we're not separate, but we become a brotherhood of human instruments experiencing life, bringing about experiences that are there to happen in order for the overall story to unfold.
It's also that I can see that the whole, if I get stuck at that hurt, I'm not open-minded anymore because I'm getting to that blame, that whole versus, okay, why did you maybe open, maybe there's actually some real gift in that hurt to like really intentional with like as a help versus like a singing against something or for something useful versus against something that's not useful.
Yeah, that's very useful, to see that what's painful today might end up flowering into something. And so then we stop saying this is bad because we say, I don't know that it's bad. It's bad in this moment, but that's all I can say. So as soon as I've said it, the moment is gone, and let's see where it unfolds. So to really come into seeing this, that a relationship might end and it might feel like it's terrible, but a year down the track you might have found some other person to relate with that delivers so much depth in terms of a relationship that actually the ending of the previous relationship, in hindsight, led to something beautiful. Talking about it's a good time to mention this differentiation between pleasure and pain and peace of mind and suffering, because sometimes the word pain is misused because of our relationship to pain. Often pain is resisted because it's felt to be an attack on who we are. And as a result, if we feel that when the flow of life delivers a painful outcome, we then feel threatened, feel as though a part of us has been taken away. And so if we relate to pain like that, whenever pain is there, we're going to have this suffering that arises. And that suffering is exactly what, in experience, when the suffering isn't there, we say, this is all I need, just the end of suffering. And because the flow of life is always going to be pleasure and pain, if our attitude to the flow of life doesn't change, it means that our happiness, our peace of mind, is going to come and go with the flow of life. So something in our attitude needs to change in order to change the relationship with life, and that is that the recognition that pleasure and pain don't ever define who we are, that who we are is always untouched by the flow of life. And from that perspective, if we start relating to pleasure and pain as it is, which is a pleasurable situation will come and then it will go, and a painful situation will come and then it will go, and recognizing that what I am remains constant and untouched by the flow of life. And we can see this, that we can find ourselves in a painful situation and feel like a part of us has been lost forever, yet in time the situation hasn't changed. So we might have lost someone that we love, and in time we then feel complete again, which really suggests that it's only our attitude in that moment, our attachment to the pleasure of the person being there, that is the problem. Because if it really was that a part of us has been lost, then it would mean that we could never feel complete at some point in the future, because that person, assuming, let's say, they die, is not going to come back. So if we recognize that in this moment I feel like a part of me has been ripped apart, but at some point in the future I feel complete again, and that can be very useful as a guide to show me, actually, I had the wrong relationship with that pain, because that pain was pain, but at some future point I felt complete again. So why, maybe I can feel complete in the presence of the pain. And if that recognition becomes stronger and stronger, then we can start to see pleasure and pain as just that, and not as something that defines our completeness.
It's still very subtle, kind of barely touching it maybe, but seeing the things that I have been habitually thinking like, oh, that's gonna make something better, that's gonna make something better, but then coming to that space, realizing none of those things can come into that space, where things are whole, complete, perfect, nothing can be added, nothing can be taken away. Like that's the fact. And all these suffering when I try and add or get, it can't be added.
No.
It's just so foreign. It's like, it feels like this, get a vague visual sense of it, just like, like this inner core where there's to stay rested, really is where that's where you're supposed to live. Versus being out of this, down the block, trying to get things for the house that you can't even get back in the house if you try carrying. As you're coming back, you might have a few things, but the closer you get, you're like, none of this can come, really. So then it's almost like, leave it all there, just be in that space. But with a clear knowing that nothing really can come, no possession can come in. So don't possess it. Because to try and possess pulls you out. Like it can't, you can't have a possession and be there. It's like, make a choice. If you want to be stuck out here with these things and pretend like you own them or possess them, or be at rest and go, this is all, the Creator's gifts. I might be here with me or not, but really it should have no bearing on my gratitude and being at rest, knowing that none of this is necessary, none of it's needed.
That's right. At the risk of so bringing a quote in from the Bible, not to be religious, but because there is wisdom in many places. And there's a quote that it is harder for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven than it is for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. So if you take it literally, there's problems. But if we recognize that what it means by a rich man, it's not someone with wealth in the flow of life, it's someone who is owning that wealth. As soon as you become the owner of that wealth, you've done exactly what you've said, is that you can't be in the kingdom of heaven, which is not after death, but right here is nirvana and samsara together. And it's an attitude whether nirvana presents itself or samsara presents itself. And as soon as we own and feel that I am a rich man, this is mine, then the doorway to nirvana is...
It's that corny saying that the glory is God's.
Yeah.
It's so,
And in practical terms, we've seen this, that we set up these expectations of what we think will make me happy. When I own my own house, then everything will be okay. When I get the promotion at work, just this one more promotion, everything is going to be okay. When I find my soulmate, everything will be okay. Yet, time and time again, we get what it is that we are seeking. And what do we find? We find that we get temporary pleasure, yet that pleasure never fully satisfies us for the long term. As soon as we attain what it is that we're seeking, we then very quickly set up another objective, because the feeling inside is, I'm still not complete, so maybe I got that wrong. Maybe I don't need a house, but I need a house and a soulmate. Then we find the soulmate, and we still feel this need for something more, until we realize actually pleasure is never going to complete me. It's there to be enjoyed. So this is not to say do not enjoy pleasure. It's not about turning pleasure away. That doesn't help either. That just means you're missing out on the joy of pleasure. But to recognize that pleasure is pleasure. Pleasure is like good food. Good food tastes good. Good food sustains. But that's not peace of mind. It'll never be peace of mind. But if we have peace of mind, then we get to enjoy pleasure and pain with peace of mind. And if we think that pleasure and pain are going to determine who we are, we'll never have peace of mind, because life will keep taking away what it has given previously.
It seems like the visual I get is like, whatever being at your core in your home, and it's like it's only go to the door, get what's enjoy what's at the door, but then go back home. Don't chase out or don't leave the house. It's such a subtle kind of visual of like how to go that way of going about being in life.
And it's attitudinal. That's important to see. Just a shift of attitude, a shift of understanding who we are versus a misunderstanding of who we are, an understanding of what is important in life versus what's not important, and not mixing the two up, not mixing everything up. And that's what it means. We can be happy right now. We don't need to go anywhere. Everything is already here. Nothing to seek, nothing to find, because it's just attitudinal change. And then we reckon it's always been here. Nothing actually has changed. It's always been here. I just was looking at things, mainly looking at myself incorrectly.
I mean, for me, I see like that identity. It's all like, for me, it's always been like competition. Because it's like there's a sense of immediately once I'm in the identity that there's a sense of lack. So then the competition gets going to try and cover up that sense of lack, which isn't really the self. It's just the self misidentified as an identity, something separate. And then trying to get back to the wholeness by competing and getting things to add to it, which never gives it a sense. I mean, some of these careers I've been in where king number one, only to go like there's no doesn't again, and then thinking to quit, like it was the problem, but it wasn't so much that it was a problem, but it was again the attitude in which I was in.
So now each time competition comes up with the insight, it's like, okay, it's happening in this moment, but if I have the capacity to allow it to drop, to recognize it's not important, it's not helpful to compete. Actually, what it's doing is it's maintaining this attitude that I am separate, that I need more than I have now. That's it. So as soon as you see that competition, when it arises, mental competition, physical competition, is actually just strengthening, because it's coming from the sense that I am separate. So now our job is just to recognize it and say, this is here, but at any moment, if it stops, my life will improve. Whereas somehow we think, if it stops, I'm going to go backwards.
It's funny because that exact, years ago I worked at a Gold's Gym for many years, and it was like I found all these like perfect formulas to get X number of results every week, like crazy results. I was so attached to them. These results I could get. But as I went about it for months and years, and then I realized I'm a slave to this. I can't, like, it's total bondage. Whatever that is, those areas where you get some formula, like, look, I can, but there's never any real satisfaction in it. And there's a superficial level of satisfaction, but again,
it's temporary. You will have a satisfaction from the pleasure of getting the result, but it will never fill the void.
But I mean, I guess, like, again, it would be mostly because we identify with form, physicality, because it was like working out, like, oh, you're going to lose the strength, so you can't stop. So then it's like, then I got to the point where I was like so big and so strong that I couldn't even scratch my back. I'm like, this is useless. Like, I'm becoming dysfunctional. And I was like, but I can't let go of the results. But it's all very childlike. I think the hardest thing with this whole thing for me has been like, like all these people that have been like pointing, to it's in God's hands, and just like it's not in your hands. Stop trying to, trying to be right, and it's like seeing how they were right, and just. Whatever that is, just the bitter pill of a notion that there was an idea there was going to be a me that was going to, be redeemed, from a me. Like there was, it's just retarded. It's just like this little kid that's like thinking it's up to him, Like I'll show them.
So what, when we let go of these ideas, often this idea of who I am as a separate entity can be very scary. It's like, I don't want to let go of the idea I'm in control, or let go of all these ideas of what's important in life, because who will I be then? And so at some point, this recognition of what our true nature is, this presenting, makes it easy for us to let go of these ideas. In fact, it's like the ideas are just preventing what's really there from coming through. So take my ideas, please. God, please take whatever doesn't serve. And what is it that shines through? The word has often been used, consciousness or awareness. And often these words, we can read them in books and sort of not really have a reference as to what it's talking about. So we read it and sort of just jump over the word. We know it's there and we don't really know what it means. What is consciousness? What is awareness? And it might be worthwhile just exploring the words so that the openness might be there, the recognition of this consciousness that has always been here, yet it's one of those things that's been taken for granted, like fresh air. It functions every single moment. Life cannot be experienced without the consciousness being here. The mistake, in a sense, is that because it's always been here, we've made an assumption that it comes from the body, that the body produces the consciousness and the awareness. And so if we make that assumption, then yes, the consciousness is always here, but it comes from who I am, from what I am, the body. And then it's a separate entity, the body, that has been produced by a mother and delivered into the world, and then the umbilical cord has been cut, and so that is now a separate entity that's not connected to anything else, and that entity, that body, is producing the consciousness. If we look at what the human being is differently and consider that what the human being is, what the daily life experience is, the human experience, is not a result of the body being first and then the consciousness coming, but rather the consciousness being there first, and a body or an instrument being produced to which the consciousness connects and then functions through. And if the body dies, the consciousness which has come from prior to the body then returns to where it came from. And so the body really can be seen then as a vehicle through which a particular life experience gets experienced. And if that, if it's destiny for that body to die at age 50 or at age 10, which can be seen like a very short period of time, we now don't feel like the entity that produced the consciousness is dead and something has been lost, and that a 10-year-old life is a shame because it should be a 70-year-old life. Actually, it's seen that it was meant to be a 10-year-old life, for the consciousness to function through and experience a 10-year experience. And that the fact that the body died, that consciousness, which is also linking to the many other living beings, has just returned and will reconnect. Maybe in the next moment, in the next birth, there will be a reconnection of that consciousness to a new. And so nothing's really lost. It's just that experience is changing. When we think it's my experience, and that what I am only exists when the body is alive, then life becomes far more threatening. we feel like we need to leave legacies behind in order to be remembered, and that's not so helpful. So how can we recognize the consciousness functioning moment to moment and realize that the consciousness that is functioning moment to moment is actually not my consciousness but the consciousness of the source? And what's fair to say is that in most daily living experiences there's no awareness of the consciousness, but rather an awareness of all of the objects that the consciousness perceives or is aware of. So if we look at the English language word consciousness and see how the word consciousness is applied in just normal daily living, maybe we can start to get a hint of what consciousness is, of what the word consciousness points to actually. And if we start to understand what the word is pointing at, there's a possibility that in a moment the consciousness will become aware of itself. So in English, if someone faints, we say they have lost consciousness. If someone were to hit someone on the head with a baseball bat, there's a potential that they can lose consciousness. If someone goes into the operating theatre and is put under an anesthesia, they lose consciousness. And in deep sleep, when we go to sleep into deep sleep and even the dream state is lost, then we are said to be unconscious. And after being hit on the head by the baseball bat, we might regain consciousness. So they lost consciousness and then regained consciousness. So hopefully that points to what is it that was lost. The body remains, the breathing, the heart function, the blood continues to function. So consciousness is not referring to aliveness of the body organism, but rather something that is functioning and then is lost, and then something that is regained, consciousness is regained. So we might start to feel, get an idea, focus in on what consciousness actually is. And often we hear the term impersonal consciousness for the source. Impersonal consciousness is what then links to a particular body-mind organism, human being or human body, to produce personal consciousness. So personal consciousness can be seen to be the consciousness coming from a particular human being's perspective. So I have personal consciousness, which is Roger's experience of life, and all other humans arise within my personal consciousness experience. Presumably all of these objects which are in my personal consciousness experience may well have their own consciousness. I don't know that. You could just be objects sitting here. And similarly, in your personal consciousness experience, assuming you have one, there are all of these human objects within your personal consciousness experience, and the trees, and that is the experience of daily living, all contained within our personal consciousness experience. But what allows personal consciousness to be here is actually the functioning of impersonal consciousness. So if we come to be aware of the personal consciousness, which means consciousness becomes aware of itself. It's not something in the mind, it's just a happening in the moment, and usually it happens once we are starting to consider, I am not a separate entity. Something intuitive is telling me, I'm not a separate entity like I used to think I was. I'm actually an entity through which the source or consciousness, impersonal consciousness, is functioning. If we don't start to consider this as an option, then it's unlikely for consciousness to wake up to itself, because we're off trying to achieve objectives, competing with people, worrying about death, worrying about a lot of things that maybe will start to fall away when we start to consider that maybe pleasure and pain is not so important, that what I am is timeless. So at some point with those considerations, consciousness might become aware of itself. And in that moment, consciousness will recognize that the functioning that it's become aware of has always been there. It's impossible for there to be a momentary daily life experience without consciousness being there. And it is the same consciousness that was present when we were 1 year old, when we were 10 years old, when we were 40 years old, and the same consciousness that will be present just before we're about to die. And that consciousness has two functions. It has the function of awareness and the function of the sense of I, or I am, existence. And both of those things, the sense of I am, which doesn't say I am the body, I am 40 years old, I am male or female, it just is I. That is the same I that was there when you were 1 year old, 40, and before you're about to die. And the sense of awareness, which is the awareness that recognizes the objects, is the same consistent awareness through our whole life, and which is there whenever there is daily living experience. And so if we wake up, if consciousness wakes up to itself, it will recognize this has always been here. This is what I am. Actually, everything that arises in daily living is not separate from what I am, but contained within what I am. That these objects only arise because my consciousness arises. If my consciousness collapses in a moment, like in deep sleep, all of the objects collapse. That the world is actually dependent on my consciousness and not separate from consciousness. And if in that moment the recognition is that this personal consciousness comes from impersonal consciousness, which means that our connection to the source, experientially, not just theoretically, is known. And if that knowing, that personal consciousness is simply a expression, a manifestation of the impersonal consciousness, then our connection to the source, moment to moment, is known simply because there is the recognition that without awareness, without the I am, both of which come from source, I can't have daily moments, daily experience. So the word awareness refers to the functioning of consciousness, the component of consciousness which recognizes everything. And the word I am refers to the sense of I, which exists in every moment, even in a meditation with one's eyes closed. There is the sense I that pervades the space. And the word consciousness refers to the combination of the two. I think, Osho, at the end of, you might be able to confirm or help me because I only remember it from a few years ago. I think at the end of each white robe there is a statement after the drum or silence, and Osho says something about recognizing your true nature as awareness or as consciousness. Do you remember what the statement is that he's played?
Always is saying that pointing to the center of your being, go in the center of your being. Like that.
Yeah. And does he, I recall the word Buddha nature.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, that was his last statement after the discourse that I bow down to the God in you, like Atman.
Right,
Atman is what he calls. So it used to be the last statement in Hindi discourses.
Right.
When he used to go around in India and used to lecture, then he used to say that I bow down, मैं pranam करता हूँ, like I salute
Okay, yeah.
God inside you.
And me too. Yeah. It's actually, when you say it that way, it's like Namaste.
Yeah, Namaste.
The same.
Pranam.
Yeah.
Pranam is like
Namaste. And I think, correct, because I've been told Namaste means the spirit in me recognizes the spirit in you. And so if we, with this explanation that the body is actually a vehicle through which the one impersonal consciousness functions as personal consciousness for each person, then it is that Roger and Priya are not different. The essence of Roger and Priya is the one consciousness. And so I bow to the consciousness functioning through you. That it is the consciousness functioning through me that is able to recognize the consciousness functioning through you, or the essence, the spirit.
It's funny, dogs keep doing that to me. They come up and they keep saying to you too. Like it's to me, there's moments where it's like there's like I don't understand like dogs, you know. I don't even have the word dog, and it's just, you know, like a really, you know, not being with me, just being with them. You know, and there's just that presence of that life force, and as much as there's like human conditioning, it's fundamentally I'm like it seems like it's the same life force. Like there's no, you know, other than there's a different conditioning.
That's it. And the conditioning comes with the body.
Yeah.
And so everyone is unique in their expression, but the underlying essence that is functioning through everyone has no conditioning. It's pure awareness, I am. And that's it. And then it functions through the body and picks up the conditioning of the body, and so personality happens, and we get identified with personality, that this is who I am, and the other, whereas actually that's just the outside, you know, layer, which makes life interesting. If everyone was the same, it wouldn't be so interesting. But to really know ourselves is to know our essence as the undifferentiated consciousness, which is the same in everyone.
It's funny too, because at that moment of recognition, the dogs typically stand up
Mhm.
and they want to start walking on two legs.
Yeah.
Like, hey, wait, I want to.
I want to see these dogs. Yeah.
Like, how do I get to that conditioning where I can walk on?
And even with the breath, actually, not only gratitude for the breath, but the breath can take us back to the present moment, where that consciousness and where the source connecting in, and the meeting point between the personal consciousness and the impersonal consciousness is this sense inside of existence, I am. That's the bridge between impersonal and personal consciousness. And if we take a deep breath, it's like, and drop into the body, that's where the meeting point is.